Okay, so now we're at the next part of our process, and this is where we are going to start entering our highlights. How we're going to start to bring out, even though we've gotten some of the, you can kind of see some of the layering, and you can see some of the contours of the actual work, but now we're going to bring it out. You bring it out with the work that you do with your highlights. Now, the tools that we're going to be using to do our highlights, there are a lot of tools that you can use, and I usually tell people that try to find excuse me, find some. There are tools that you can use that you have around the house that you can do your highlights with. There's no specific tool that you have to use, but one thing you will notice when you take most of the classes of my classes is that we won't be using any, we don't use white paint to do our highlights. Now, we do use white paint, we'll mix it in with color to do certain things, but for a highlight now, where you see people that do airbrush work, they'll go in and then they'll, after they do the painting, and they put in their highlights with the white paint. We don't do that. You won't be doing that in these classes. We use the actual canvas, and then we go in with certain tools that we're going to be using to bring the highlights up. One of the main tools you're going to be using is your eraser, or you can use a pencil eraser. You're also going to be using your X-Acto knife. And when we use our X-Acto knife, we make sure that we're going to be careful to use the edge of the X-Acto knife. We don't use the point, and you don't point this directly at you want to use the edge, and you'll see how we do that. An electric eraser. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little highlighting with our eraser. And the good thing about using these two tools, if you had these two tools, they actually help with each other, because you can use this tool to sharpen this tool. You want to get a nice little edge on. So let's say where we're going to start. The first place I'm going to start is I'm going to start in this eye, right next to the eyeball, and we see we have some, on this particular image, we have some highlights here. So we're just going to put in a little bit of these highlights that we see here. So you're just going to kind of like see if you can replicate some of the highlights that you see there. You know, get the general shape of the highlight that you see. Now, as you start to work, you'll start to see what was the purpose of coloring an eyeball that's most people look at as white. Now you can see why you actually put that, you throw that color into your eyeball. So we're just going to, now I'm going to go in with my knife. And I'm just going to try to replicate some of these little highlights I see. Don't get too dramatic with it. And we can see over here that this kind of looks like just like a little glare. So we're going to use our little eraser, and don't worry if you seem like you're pulling off too much color right now, because you're just learning how to do this. So don't expect it to be perfect. And now we see striations, like little light areas that are going out. Seems like they're reflecting out from your dark area. So we're just gonna add some of those. And we're gonna get in a little closer so that you can see what we're doing. So you're going to put your highlights just where you see your highlights. If we see your highlights, this is why you got to pay close attention. Now we're going to go over to this corner of the eye, and this corner of the eye you're almost always going to show you where the wetness of the eye is. Okay. So as you put these highlights in, you'll start to see how it kind of replicates the wetness of the eye. All right. So we're going to be going, back and forth with the tools, the different tools, whatever tool you think gives you the best. Give you the best result for what you're doing. So we have a highlight here. You see a highlighted area. So you're going to put that in, and we have a highlight over this area. And I should have mentioned that this is this is not the best canvas, because this was a canvas that somebody had previously stretched, and I just decided to use it because it was blank, just to show you how to create the eye. Okay. So in this particular, we really weren't going to go in and do this highlight like the reflection, but I think I'm going to put it in anyway, just so that we see how we do it. All right, and so reflection of the eye, that's kind of looks like a little horseshoe. So you might just want to put it in with your eraser first, and then you're going to go, and then you can just go back in and put it in with your knife so you can get a deep highlight. Now remember, when you're doing these highlights, when you're putting in your highlights, even though you are trying to replicate what you see, you don't want to keep doing it so much that you damage your canvas. Okay, so we have the little, now this is different than what you would normally see because it's a reflect. I believe this is coming from the light that's on, behind the camera. Okay, so you want to put this highlight here. Now also, there are some light little striations that you want to be careful as you're putting them in. And then we have some striations up in the folds of the eye. Now, when you see those jagged highlights or those jagged striations, it's usually going to be a better bet to use your X-Acto knife than the eraser, because you want your highlight to be deep. These highlights are at light source, so they're pretty, prominent. And when you're doing them with the X-Acto knife, you don't really need to make it lighter, because what you're going to be doing next, the rest of the process is going to take care of that. Remember, as you go darker, as you put your layers on, it's going to bring out the coloring. This is going to seem a lot lighter. Always remember, you don't have to, because this is airbrushing, you don't always have to utilize the airbrush for everything. There are processes where you can go in with a regular brush and the airbrush paint. You can also use regular acrylic paint and go right over top of what you've already done. Gives it an excellent look. Okay, so now you're starting to see how we give the eye a look of, you know, being wet and having moisture in it. We have a little bit more realism to it. Alright, so now we're just going to take care of things around the eye. But as you can see now, you start to see the depth of the eye. As you go around to the corner of the eye, you can see the roundness of the eyeball. Just because, you know, you're doing your shading correctly. The eye looks real, like it's actually looking at you and watching you and all that good stuff. Alright, so now we've gotten that portion done. So then we're going to go down and do some of the highlights that we see at the bottom. And so we can go really, really light. You know, or you can get it from a Home Depot or Dollar Store or whatever. But it lets you do a wide area that you might not normally be able to do with the knife or the eraser. So now we're going to look at what we were talking about when I told you about not going dark, and that you're looking at the relationship from the light area to the dark area, where just by you highlighting a certain area, what you would think that you would go in and make dark, you actually don't have to do it. As you can see, there are two lines here that are coming down right near the eye, but you really can't see it as much because it's close to the overall color. But if you take we're going to take the alright, so we're going to take our pencil eraser and we're going to create a highlight right next to that dark line that you can barely see, instead of darkening that line up to bring it out. Because once you start darkening lines, when you see little striations in the line and you start darkening them, then they don't look real. They look like lines. So instead of making this dark, what you're going to do, and line going here, and then there's one right under it. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put a highlight right in the middle of that. You're not making it too light. And this one has a little light that's going right next to it, and you might not be able to see this, but you'll see it in the final scope of things. All right, let me see if I can get in closer so you can see. Okay. So you see this? This was the dark line that we had before. This was the other line that's coming down. If you can see in that area where if you're going around it, you can create that little, kind of like that little triangle that's coming out of there. It's like a triangle coming out here and going down into the face. So all you need to create that is go around it. You don't need to darken it in. You just go around it and highlight the area around it. And that's going to bring out that highlight. Now, as you're looking at this, I have this zoomed in close. Very closely zoomed in. So for you looking at it, you can see the scrapings and the striations and everything, and it has the kind of like a rough look to it. But remember, art, when people look at art, they're standing back. So they're not looking as close as you're looking at this piece. So when they're standing back and they're looking at this piece, it's going to have a more realistic, it's going to have a realistic look to it. It's going to look like the eyeball is wet, realness to it. Okay, so now we have some areas here under the eye. See that area is dark under the eye, but we already put that in there. Remember, we put this in already, so we don't really need to redo that. So all we're going to do is put in our highlights. All right, so we got highlight coming down from here. That's coming from the side of your face, and there's generally almost every portrait you do, there is going to be a highlight that comes because you have that shadow area where your face starts to turn a corner, where the side of your face meets the front of your face. You'll have that highlight there. So there's a highlight here. And also remember that you're going back in with more color. This is just the base color. So you're going to have a lot of layers of color that you're going to be putting in. And then we have an area just right above here. And remember, we shortened this eye because we changed it. So now I'm going to start getting rid of that error part that we have. All right, so we're going to go just over, and we're going over this part of it just for good measure. We're not really concerned with this because this is an eye video. And pretty much everything you're doing for this eye, you're going to do for the right eye. This is just to teach you how to structure and paint an eye, how you go about it. Now, if you're interested, if you want to know how to do a full portrait, follow my other videos. I have several videos that I have up that cover the entire subject, but this one is just for this eye. Okay, so now when we first started and we were putting in this eyebrow here, I explained to you that some people may have they may have gotten their eyebrow arched or shaped. so it'll look a lot straighter than what we have here. But the way that you handle that, and as you can see, we still have our little area with the okay. So we're just going to lighten that area up. I'm going to get rid of that area there. Okay, so the way you would handle that is you can take your pencil, and we actually made it look like she had a pimple, didn't we? But you're going to take your pencil and you can go around the edge. And I know a lot of women looking at that and was like, wow, I wish it was this easy. If you don't know, a lot of women use wax to do this. Hot wax at that. So ask your sister, ask your wife, ask your mother. They'll tell you what I'm talking about. Not the... And they put wax on there and then they just snatch it off. And that's how they shape it. Alright. So now, over the top of this eye, you see like a light area over there. So we're going to put that in. And for that one, I'm going to use the block here. And we're just going to kind of like shape, pull out some of that color. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the eye. So we know the hairs are going this way on this eyebrow. So that we're going to reflect that with our X-Acto knife. And you're just doing light little scratches that you're going to be putting in here. This is why we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to paint each individual here. Okay. So now you have the illusion of flowing hair. And we're going to do our little highlight once again. This is all about getting the shaping and adding that realism to your eye.